You've been playing that wrong. This is a video in a series of videos about rules in Scythe that players seem to often get wrong or be confused about. And this particular You've Been Playing That Wrong video concerns the mill, which is a great structure, one of the most powerful structures in the game, but which a lot of players seem to be a little bit confused about. I've built the mill here on a tundra space that would normally produce oil. I happen to have a worker on that space. I also have two workers on another tundra space that produce oil. And I have another worker in a village space back near my home territory. And that is, at this point in the game, all of the workers that I have in play. Now you'll notice that the mill was removed from a part of my player board when I take the produce top row action. And so the mill's special ability comes into play whenever you take the produce action. So when I produce, if I choose produce, I'm going to choose produce right now. Okay? So I put my player marker down on the produce square. The very first thing I have to do to produce is I have to pay whatever costs are shown in red at the top of my player back. So this says producing costs me 1 bolster. So I move over to the power meter here. I'm the yellow player, so I'm going to reduce my power by 1 in order to carry out the produce action. Then I get the benefits shown in green, and I can take as many of these as I want across the top row action here. Notice that there's 2 hexes, which are identified with the words produce with worker on. So I can choose any 2 hexes that I have workers on and produce resources on those hexes. In addition, I can also produce on the hex that has the mill, following the normal production rules. So the choice is fairly straightforward here for me. I have 3 spaces with workers. I can choose 2 of them. Remember, that's the first part. I can choose 2 of them in order to produce on. Okay, I have 1 worker here on a village hex, so I'm going to produce 1 worker. The second space that I'm going to identify for producing is this one. I have 2 workers on an oil space, and the whole hex is activated with the produce action, so each of them is going to produce 1 oil. Now, because I have a mill, I can then find the hex in which I have the mill and produce on that space as a bonus. Now, on that space, I have a mill and a worker. Each of them produce whatever resource is made on that hex. So the worker produces 1 and the mill produces 1. I've been able in this turn, because I had the mill, to produce 4 oil and 1 villager. Now let's say a little bit later in the game, I'm able to take those oil and I'm able to spend those oil to do an upgrade. So with the upgrade action, I'm just going to take the bottom row action here for simplicity. It's going to cost me 2 oil to produce an upgrade. So I can spend 2 oil from any space that I control, and then I can take an upgrade. And let's say I'm going to choose to upgrade my production ability, and I'm going to reduce the cost of, let's say, deploying future mechs. All right, the key thing is I've now upgraded my production ability. Okay, so let's say I move around the board a little bit. This guy goes here, and this guy goes here. And let's say this guy goes here. Okay, so this is a little bit later in the game. I now want to produce again. So I take my player token, I move it over to the produce space. And the first thing I have to do, of course, is pay the cost. I'm going to lose another power. And then I can now identify 3 different hexes. Because I upgraded, I can identify 3 different hexes to produce on. So now I've got a little bit of a choice here. I've got a worker on a farm, a worker on a mountain, a worker on a forest, and a worker on a tundra, plus the worker back there with my mill space. I'm going to identify these 3 hexes in order to do production. So I've got 1 worker here, he makes a wood. I've got 1 worker in the mountain space, so he's going to make a metal. And then I've got 1 worker in that tundra space, and he's going to make an oil. And then, as a bonus, because I have the mill, I can also find the space on which my mill exists and produce on that space using the normal production rules. I have a worker and a mill. Each of them is able to produce an oil. And that completes my turn. I was able to make 3 different oil, a wood, and a metal by virtue of having the mill. And that's how the mill works.